Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Thank you so much, everyone online. I know I'm looking at you now, even though you're behind me. We are really excited for our annual Civics for Environmentalists and Other Advocates 2 presentation. It's going to be about 90 minutes long today. We'll have extra time that we can take for questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, or for folks in the room, we'll ask for hands to be raised. We're going to go through the whole presentation, and then we'll answer any questions that are there. We are recording this as well, so if you need to refer back to it later, but we'll take any questions you all have about the process or about any bills you want to hear about after we're done presenting. For those of you who are attorneys and want continuing legal education, we are going to put into the chat a form to fill out to receive the continuing legal education. You'll be getting 90 minutes of it, and for those of you here in person, just sign up with Jen Kwan, who is up front. So to get started, welcome to Civics for Advocates. I am Jen Welling, the Executive Director of the Illinois Environmental Council, and I have with me
David McEllis, Illinois Legislative Director for the Environmental Law and Policy Center.
So we're going to talk a little bit about what our organizations do. The Illinois Environmental Council is an organization that's been around since 1975. We're a coalition organization of over 150 at this point, different environmental or community-based organizations from around the state. Environmental Law and Policy Center is on our board of directors, as well as many other really great environmental organizations. And we work on representing all those organizations in Springfield. We're building power for people in the environment. And our activities include drafting policies, analyzing policies, passing policies, killing bad policies, coordinating all of our member affiliates to be one powerful voice of the community, and building consensus around environmental policy issues.
And welcome to our office at ELPC. Thank you to those of you in person, and hope you enjoyed a warm walk over. ELPC is a Midwest-based public interest advocacy and environmental policy organization. And so we work throughout the Midwest. We have offices in multiple states as well as in DC. And we have attorneys, business specialists, policy experts, and communications folks, and lobbyists like myself working on environmental issues throughout the Midwest and at the national level.
Thank you. So I'm going to be going through a number of our first slides and then pitching it off to David McEllis. So our agenda for the day, we're going to talk about the Illinois General Assembly. Who are these people? We're going to talk about legislative process, bill drafting, bill research, and making your voice heard in the Illinois General Assembly. I know we are doing continuing legal education. So the first thing I'm going to go to in all of this, I'll switch with you when we need to do different slides here. I want to talk about how a lot of this is rooted in the Illinois Constitution. And this is a document that can only be changed by a vote of the people. And so that, or a constitutional convention, which we'd have to vote on. And so this is pretty set in stone. And there are a number of items in the Illinois Constitution that impact our everyday lives in terms of legislative process. So one of the pieces I want to talk about, and I'm going to have a graphic later, Illinois is a state where a bill needs to pass both chambers with the exact same text before it heads to the governor. There are other states or the federal government where different pieces of legislation can pass the House or the Senate. It could have different bill numbers. It might go up and then have some reconciliation or go to the governor. We can't do that here. It's a House bill that goes to the Senate, a Senate bill that goes to the House. There may be some amendments we're going to talk about later, but it needs to be both the same text. And this is section 8, section B, bills may originate in either house, but may be amended or rejected by the other. And then there also are in the Constitution, section C, that we need a majority of members elected to be the person that votes on it. And then there's a super majority. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of the May 31st deadline, both in drafting and passing a piece of legislation. And I'll refer to it in a second. But the big part I want to get to that is in the Illinois Constitution, section D, all bills shall be read by title on 3 different days in each house. You'll see that I said title. And when we get to this, you're going to hear a lot, and I'm going to say these things about reading several times because it's confusing at first. Like, what is a reading? So there's a first, second, and third reading, and it's in both chambers. So the title of a bill, technically, to pass a bill just from origination to the end, has to take at least 5 days, because there's first, second, third reading on different days, and that third reading can be on the same as the first reading the other, and then first, second, third. But we're gonna reference magic a lot during this. I guess you guys didn't know you're going to this magic show today. There's a lot of times where magic happens, and I have seen or caused a bill to be passed in less than 12 hours before. But the bill title has moved through that process, is doing first, second, third reading, first, second, third reading, and then maybe there's amendments. We are gonna go through amendments in a little bit. But that is the magic of the General Assembly. Most of my bills don't go through magic, but there's a lot of other powerful interests that experience that magic. But that is the piece that is in the Constitution. And like I said, first, second, and third reading, I find it's a little bit of a difficult concept to understand. And we're gonna go through it several times, but to give you literally a first reading, they don't even need to be there on the floor. The bill is introduced, but there literally is a clerk that just reads the number and the bill title out loud, and it's played in the speaker somewhere in the state capitol. You could theoretically access it online, but they don't necessarily do it at times, so be aware. But there's literally somebody that goes House Bill 2884 and like reads it, and so there's a reading of it. And then on second reading, the legislator introducing it does need to be in the chamber, and they read it on the floor again. That one, the legislators are on the floor. And the third reading is a vote, and it can be on the calendar, third reading, and the third reading is where they go for a vote. We're gonna cover these readings several times because it's probably one of the most complex pieces that I find people experience. What is it? What do they mean? But we'll go through theirs. I also, in the final part of the Constitution, and David is gonna cover this later, is the effective date of laws. We're gonna talk about how important May 31st is, and how that is such an important cutoff, and that's because of the Constitution. So in order for a bill to become effective in the calendar year that it was passed, it needs to pass before June 1st with a majority. And after that May 31st at midnight, and you know, they used to like play some games with the clock. I've never seen them play games with the clock on this anymore, but you know, we've heard about that in the 70s and 80s. You know, maybe there was an internet to make sure that it was connected. But you know, they used to stop the clock.
One famous example of that is the vote to build the new, what it was then in the late 80s, new Comiskey Park. Now the White Sox are looking to move again, but famously that vote, there was a reporter from St. Petersburg, Florida, where the White Sox were expected to move to. He was sitting on the House floor and he said, well, by my watch, it's midnight. How could they vote on this bill? Well, the clock in the chamber had miraculously stopped moving. There was an agreement between the speaker and the governor, and that's how that stadium got built. They did not need a 2/3 majority vote because it hadn't hit midnight.
Magic. So that's magic. Time stops sometimes in the General Assembly. But it needs to pass by that time, May 31st at midnight, or you need a super majority. But there's other pieces. If it's effective after the next year, then you don't need that super majority. David's gonna go through some of that in drafting. But the next to talk about votes, talking about how many you need. So the legislature, who are these people? There's 118 members of the Illinois House. Right now, there's 78 Democrats, 40 Republicans, and there's 59 senators, 40 Democrats, 19 Republicans. The way that our General Assembly works, each Senate has 2 House districts. So you will have 1 House member and 1 senator. And you can figure out who represents you. ILGA.gov is the legislator lookup tool that is on there. It's also, you can get your districts from wherever you are registered to vote. You can get all of that information, but and this is a theme throughout. If you think your state senator is Dick Durbin, he's not. It's your US senator. And don't feel bad if you don't know this stuff that we're gonna teach today, or you don't know who your state legislators are. This process of civics and government, I think personally, it's designed to be extremely hard for people and the public to access. And that's why we're doing this today, because we want to make sure that folks can access their government, understand how it works. really open up the process, because the more of you are there, the more we can protect the environment. So don't feel bad about any of this, but if you think Tammy Duckworth or Dick Durbin are your state senator, go to ilga.gov, go to the legislative lookup tool and look up your state senator. And there's lots of information on the next slide about your particular lawmakers. And it includes contact information, committee assignments, a biography, associated representatives. Go check it out and you might learn something about your legislator. It's always a good idea from a power building perspective to learn about your legislators. You can go follow them on social media, go follow them on Twitter or X or Instagram or Facebook, learn what they're interested in, figure out what they're working on. And that's an important part of the process, is knowing who the people are who make these decisions. We talked about the process, and this is a simplified version of the process, which is that it's introduced in a first chamber, it goes to a committee, there's a floor vote. It goes to the next chamber, committee, floor vote. If there's changes, there's concurrence, and then it goes to the governor for signing, vetoing, etc. And then it becomes law. But I have included in this next piece, maybe I can, let's take that. Look again, this is what it really looks like from start to finish, is this fantastic maze. But, you know, there's this cartoon, but for real, this is the legislative, this is very similar. It's not a previous cartoon, right? This is the legislative research unit, has this how a bill becomes a law. And to be honest, there's a couple of changes even from this version, because the Senate amended its rules to allow bills to go from more than one committee. Although I haven't seen that done yet, but it was changed in the rules. This is all of the pieces that could possibly happen with it, and it is a maze, and we are here to guide you through that maze. So an important thing you need to know about the General Assembly, and I love that there are deadlines. With city council, with federal government, you know, there might be some deadlines, but especially city council. You know, there might be a committee and they can just keep moving it month after month after month. There might be a call of an ordinance on the floor and they can just keep moving it. And just, we're gonna do it next, we're gonna do it next month. They can't do that in the Illinois General Assembly to some extent. There are deadlines that need to be met. If you haven't met the deadlines, the bill goes back to Rules or Assignments Committee and is generally dead for the year. We'll talk about what rules and assignments mean. So, there are, right now, today, January 19th, this is the deadline for bills being drafted. So Legislative Reference Bureau, which David is going to walk you through. Today's the day that you have to turn in all the requests. In fact, we probably are past, it probably was a new deadline, so you're probably done.
We have a question in the chat. Can you repeat what LRB means?
Yes, Legislative Reference Bureau, and we are going to go through the Legislative Reference Bureau in full in about 20 slides. So we're going to be going through that. But these are all those deadlines in the House and the Senate, the Legislative Reference Bureau requests. And then there's an introduction of House bills and Senate bills are February 9th. So that's when all of the bills need to be put in. And then there's committee deadlines of April 5th and March 15th for when the bills need to be out of committee. There's a third reading deadline. That's when it has to go for a full vote. And then it does it again. And then they're supposed to get out May 26th this year, but they can go until May 31st. They have us booked until then, but who knows? Maybe they'll get done early, maybe they won't. With this new speaker, they've generally gotten done pretty early, which has been really fantastic for my Memorial Day plans. So those are all the deadlines, and there are places where, you know, sometimes when you feel like you're close to an agreement that you might move a bill out of committee and it's out, but you're gonna need to amend it later. So technically you've met that deadline, but you might have more time to move it forward. So there's things that you can do to meet these deadlines that aren't necessarily meeting the deadline directly. So everything, I will tell you, next slide, is on a calendar. And this calendar is really important for you as a constituent and your very important voice, because this is a way that you can tell whether a lawmaker is in their district office or not. So if you want to meet with the lawmaker and you want to meet them at home right now is great. Like, this is the time, actually between now and February 6th, they're in their district office, unless they're in Florida somewhere, which is where, you know, well, maybe have more left state for some of us, but they are somewhere warm right now. But they might be in their district office, so you can go and visit them in that office. If they say they can't meet with you in their district office in May, they are not lying to you. They are in Springfield. So, this is a good way to check where they are and what days you might come visit, because I recommend a visit from all of you. But one of the things with all of this is that you can watch all of this online if you'd like to. When I first started, not all of this was online. And 30 years ago, when we didn't have the internet, there was a bulletin board that they put, like, this committee is coming at this time, and you had to go look at the bulletin board. And so now it's online, so you have some idea, and you can watch committee hearings, you can watch floor action. We like to keep people updated, IEC, when they can watch important votes for our members. This is in fact a little side of a bunch of us watching a committee hearing from Saputo's in Springfield, because there was an important bill that came up. We're having dinner and watching a committee hearing. And so you can listen to it live. There's also, if you go to ilga.gov, which we're going to go through more in a bit, you can look at what's happening this week. This is an extremely old one from 2020, because there's nothing up this week that I could update, but it'll give you when all the committee hearings are going to happen, which is like a rough estimate of when the committee hearings will happen. I mean, like, I've had a committee hearing be like 6 or 7 hours late before, so it just depends on what else is happening that day, but this is their rough estimates. You have an idea of where they're going to be and what's happening during the week. So now I'm going to pitch it off to David to talk about May 31st.
And Jen has talked about May 31st as the deadline for bill action during the session. And so generally I tell my friends, like, well, from January to May, just don't count on me showing up to things, because I'll be in Springfield for most of the week. But over the last few years, they have finished prior to May 31st, which is nice. But May 31st is a constitutional deadline for a vote requirement. If something passes after May 31st, to take effect immediately, it has to have a supermajority vote. And that means a 2/3 majority vote. So in the Senate, that would be a 36 vote majority to pass. And in the House, that's 71 votes. And so this is important for the effective dates of bills. As I mentioned earlier with that other vote, if the bill had been passed after midnight, they would have required a 2/3 majority vote. It was a tax increase. They weren't going to get a 2/3 majority vote, so they just held the line and only needed a 50-50 majority. So different kinds of effective dates that you can put on a bill. You can be immediately effective. It can be a specific date in the future. You could say, you know what, we want to give somebody 2 years to be able to comply with this, so this won't go into effect until 2026. Or it could be based on other bills. You could say, if these 3 bills all go into effect, then this one goes into effect. So it can be contingent on a bunch of different things. It can also have no effective date. If it has no effective date, that means that the bill goes into effect January 1st of the next year, if it's passed before May 31st, or June 1st, if it passes after May 31st.
And then this down here is
Oh, yeah.
one of the worst things that's ever happened to me, which was that bill. It was a 2012, so I still even have this in here because I remember that moment in 2012 when we were working on a really important bill on DNR funding. And with that bill, I'm just gonna pull this up for a second for folks on here. The bill was on its way, and then there was like a late committee hearing, and then there was 3/5 vote required. So 33 votes, which normally you need 30, was not enough. But the good story is we came back in the fall and had 40 votes. So we had more than what we even needed. So just wanted to share why the 2012 bill is on there. Still living in that moment.
You click on them. Yeah, there
There
we
we
go.
go.
And there is, again, because this is for CLE credit, figured we should talk about a court case. Recently, within the last 6 or so years, there was a Illinois Supreme Court case dealing with the effective dates of laws. And that was Springfield Right to Life versus Felicia Norwood. This was a bill that dealt with the trigger language. And so at the time, prior to the Roe versus Wade decision being overturned by the Supreme Court, Illinois had trigger language that said that should that decision be overturned by the Supreme Court, that Illinois would also have an abortion ban. So this removed that trigger language, but it also included some funding for, some state funding for abortion services. So there's a court challenge. One of the challenges was about the effective date. There was no effective date in the legislation, which should mean that it goes into effect January 1st of the next year if it passes before May 31st. There was a strategic decision made by the Senate because Governor Rauner had indicated that he might sign the bill or might veto the bill. He had run as a pro-choice Republican. So on May 10th, the bill passes. So that's prior to the May 31st deadline. If it goes straight to the governor and he signs it, it goes into effect January 1st of the next year. This strategic move was made to file what's called a motion to reconsider. When a person is on the prevailing side of a vote, they can file a motion to reconsider. Maybe the bill passed by one vote and they were like, wait a minute, what did I just vote on? That happens. Sometimes you get a 300-page bill and then you realize you're the one deciding vote and you think, I might need to reconsider my vote. Oftentimes it's used in a strategic way like this. It can be used by a person to try to block a bill from moving forward, just to try to waste some time. In this case, the motion was filed by now Senate President Harmon. He removed that motion to reconsider in September. So the bill hadn't been sent to the governor before May 31st. It gets sent there on September 25th. This challenge said, the legislature didn't act on this before May 31st. This shouldn't go into effect January 1st. The court said that the last legislative action was the vote that was taken on May 10th, not the procedural motion. And so the bill became effective January 1st of 2018. When we're drafting bills, Jen has talked about the Legislative Reference Bureau. We take whatever we have. I've seen notes scribbled on a napkin. I've seen fully formed, beautiful looking legislation drafted in reams of paper, everything in between. We always encourage folks to, if you have a bill idea, do some research, figure out if there's already something on the books, if there's already something in Illinois law that is related, that looks maybe like it, that can be slightly amended, go to a different state to look at what other states are doing, and draft as much of the language as you can. It could be directly copied from another state, but then we have to take it to what's called the Legislative Reference Bureau.
And then
Which-
plagiarism highly encouraged in legislative drafting. Just wanna, that's one area of life.
Yeah, and you don't even have to attribute your plagiarism.
Yeah, no citations, plagiarize, copy paste, it's encouraged.
So in the drafting process, you take whatever you have, your slip of paper, your grand idea, and you take it to the Legislative Reference Bureau. It's recommended, I think you may have to be a registered lobbyist or a staffer. But if you have an idea that's great, you can talk to Generi and we can take something to LRB. You have to have a bill sponsor identified, somebody who says, yep, that's a good idea, because otherwise what could end up happening is, this is a team of attorneys in Springfield who draft all of the legislation into the format that it needs to be to go on ILGA and to become a law. If everyone is just saying, hey, there should be, write a bill about this, they're gonna get inundated with thousands of requests and not really know how to sift through to what's actually a real idea that could become a law versus just a good idea that somebody came up with and no legislator actually wants to file. You'll have to choose an effective date, as previously discussed, immediate, a specific alternate date, or it can be silent. And you should have the statute ready to know what area of law, or at least the subject matter. And then they'll direct it to the right person at LRB, the right attorney. And we encourage folks to get those drafts in as early as possible, because today, well, if you've waited this long, you're too late. So for next year, you can start getting those requests in today. Some of the parts of the bill that are going to be included, and each year I come up with an idea for a new law, and oftentimes they're really bad.
Well, I'm excited about this year's.
I didn't come up with a new idea this year. Well, I was gonna come up with an idea because Jen told me that she unplugged somebody's EV, and I was gonna make that against the law.
That didn't happen, it's not real.
Or we could at least write a law to set some parameters around how to unplug an EV. But the bill idea that I have is just for a bill to require the transition to EV school buses. So I'll use this as an example as we're going through the parts of the bill to kind of describe what that bill might look like and what some of those ideas are. So the subject of the bill is also that title that Jen was talking about, with where on the floor, they would say Senate Bill 1, an act concerning, in my case with the EV school buses, it could be an act concerning education, an act concerning vehicles, transportation.
I've seen an act concerning fish.
An act concerning fish, sometimes you want it to be as specific as possible, because as we get further into this process, there are some times where bills end up turning magically into other things that they weren't intended to be. But if it's an act concerning fish, legally, the courts might look askance at that if you throw a nuclear energy bill on there and it's an act concerning fish. I don't know, or some other idea.
Three-eyed fish, I don't know.
Yes, Springfield or the Simpsons references are always appreciated. The short title of a bill doesn't always have to be in a bill, but it could be something like the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act or the Future Energy Jobs Act. Oftentimes in the bill, it says this act will be referred to as the Future Energy Jobs Act or something like that. And that's more of a marketing thing or an organizing piece of this. So sometimes you can come up with cool acronyms. I don't really have a great idea for this. It could be the Electric School Bus Act.
Yeah, well, and sometimes when you go get stuff drafted, they won't let you write it the way that you want to. So like a dirty little secret is that the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act is just what we call it. That's actually not the name of the act. It's the
Something else.
Energy something act. So Energy Transition Act is what the actual act is named.
The purpose, policy, legislative intent could be the next piece of this, and we'll go through some examples in a little bit. That can be, I've seen everything from a narrative that talks about the importance of clean energy development, jobs, transition to a green economy. It can be narrative, it can include stats, it can include all those kind of things. And that's just to show the intent of the bill. It's not necessarily legally active language unless there's a court challenge and somebody says, what was the point of this bill? Then they might go to that public policy. And ours, we could just say like, the intent of this bill is to move Illinois away from diesel school buses. Definitions, those are definitions that are specific to that bill. So you're gonna, in our case with the EV School Bus Act, you want to define what is an electric vehicle. Is it one that is hybrid, that has electric components? Is it fully electric? There's already a definition of school buses, so you want it to maintain that so that it actually looks like a school bus. But there's some that are just gonna be, you can refer to other definitions like equity investment eligible communities, so that you're making sure that those school buses are serving individuals who need the most impact on their air quality. So those kind of definitions can be included. And then it's the main provisions of the bill. And that's the protein of the bill that says it is illegal for Jen Walling to unplug an electric vehicle in a public charging space, or it says the transition to electric school buses shall be complete by 2035, or something like that. That's the active, what the bill does. Penalties, I mean, in the case with Jen and the EVs, it's gonna be a severe penalty.
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, but in this case, I don't think we would have a penalty provision in the School Bus Act because we don't want to put school administrators, fine them for not complying with it. Severability versus inseverability clauses, specifically in the Future Energy Jobs Act, there was a severability clause. The severability clause says if any portion of this law is struck down by the court as unconstitutional, the rest of the bill remains intact so long as it can operate without that struck portion of the bill. That was actually challenged. The Future Energy Jobs Act was challenged unsuccessfully. The challenge was on the nuclear bailout provisions of that bill, if that challenge had been successful, there was a severability clause that would have sliced those off and allowed the rest of the bill to remain. And that was an important provision to have in there, just in case someone challenges something and you want the rest of a good bill to remain law. The repeal date can be on there. You can put a sunset date and say this law shall be in effect until 2029. Sometimes those are put in there for regulatory schemes to get people to come back and have to re-up every 5 years. And sometimes it can just be a repeal date. You don't have to put a repeal date on there if you just want something to remain law forever. And then the effective date is the final thing that you're going to want to set, which is immediate, January 1st of the next year, or some date in the future. When you're drafting a bill, a new portion of an act, if there's no law that you're amending, is not underlined. So it's just plain text like that. New text in an existing law is underlined, and old text that you want removed is struck through. And so we'll see some examples. Here's an example of new text, and this is also an example of findings or legislative purpose about the clean economy. I think that this is from CEJA. And that's all new text, so it is not underlined. Strike through or underline. Here is, sometimes when they're cleaning up acts, a bill will start with having numbered sections, but then as they're cleaning it up, they just say this section. We don't have to refer to it by a number. And in this case, they've struck through section 1-75 of this act and replaced it with this. So you can see what that looks like. Some of the specific environmental statutes and statutes that we deal with here, public utilities is 220, public health is 410, environmental safety is 415, agriculture, conservation, 505 and 525. So if you wanted to do something on pesticides, you might call the Legislative Reference Bureau and say, I want something in the agriculture code 505. On ilga.gov, there's a lot of resources for if you're doing research on what kind of bill that you want to do and how, if there's something that already exists, you can look through the Illinois Constitution, the Illinois compiled statutes, as well as administrative rules, which are administrative agencies create rules after a bill is passed. Those rules allow them to implement that law. You can also look at House bills, Senate bills, and also the legislators that, as Jen showed before, and proposed administrative rules are all available on ilga.gov. It's a little bit archaic, a little bit of a Web 1.0 1998 website, but we'll walk you through here. If you know your bill number, you can search for it. If you search by keyword, God help you. It's difficult. It is not Google. It is not a smart search system. If you put in firearms, you're going to get 1,000 different results. And the search tools are not super helpful.
Well, and the important thing to know, when you look up firearms and it shows you all of those results, it doesn't just show you new bills that edit that portion. It'll show you anywhere that, so when they put in text, like David said, it'll have other parts of the act. If you're amending just a little part of the act, it'll have what is existing law. And so if you look at firearms, anywhere where existing law might have firearms, it'll just show up. So like compost, you look it up, you aren't necessarily getting bills that deal with compost. You're getting everywhere in law that compost is mentioned in a bill. And it's very difficult to use. So enjoy, but.
Yes, and there is an advanced search mechanism that is a little bit better, but it's quite difficult, and definitely recommend if you're looking for something or know something exists to let us know, and it might be easier for us to find it. But from this front page, you can also find Senate, House members, schedules, committee schedules, as Jen was talking about before. And now we'll walk through a bill, how to read it, with the bill number, sponsors, the short summary, and then the text of the bill. We have the full, this is Senate Bill 100. This was a bill about disposable food waste. So we have the full text. You can click on that and it will show you the entirety of the bill. And we'll get to that in a little bit. It'll show you the sponsor. If there were co-sponsors, they would be hyphenated after that. It shows you a summary, which it is a synopsis that is sometimes helpful. For this one, it is.
Actually, this one, talking about synopsis, when you need to read the bill, this one had a wrong date that, from the rest of the bill. So the one with the LRB put in the synopsis was not correct.
So maybe it's not
that's the
helpful.
thing. In the controlling language is the full text of the bill, not the synopsis.
And here's the full text of that bill. And so sometimes we have a bill that's 300 pages and sometimes you have one that's 3. And this one has all the sections. You have the definitions for the purposes of this section. It says what disposable food service container means, what polystyrene foam means, serviceware. And then it also has that the main provisions of the bill are beginning January 1st, 2025. An establishment may not sell or distribute disposable food service container that is composed of polystyrene foam. So that's kind of the main provision. It can be short, or it could be multiple pages. This is what an effective date looks like. It just says this act takes effect upon becoming law. So as soon as it's signed by the governor, it is immediately effective. When you're researching a bill, looking at the summary, that synopsis is sometimes helpful. Sometimes a synopsis, if a bill has been amended, might have nothing to do with what that bill ends up as. Doing an initial read through of the bill, trying to get an idea of what it does, sometimes can be helpful. Sometimes it says exactly what it's trying to do. Sometimes it's more confusing. It's also helpful to know who brought that bill. So if you're looking at legislation, you see Senator Laura Fine proposed Senate Bill 100. You say, who brought this piece of legislation? You call their assistant. They will say, oh, Jen Walling and Illinois Environmental Council are supportive of that. And that will help you know, sometimes you know, that's an IEC bill, or that's a Farm Bureau bill, or whatever. And you can kind of tell from what vantage point they're coming from.
And we're gonna talk about witness slips in a second. You also can go see who's filed the witness slip after it's been in committee. So that's another way to tell.
And then looking for some phrases, searching for those phrases that, and being as specific as possible in searching.
Great.
Look, okay.
Yep, so, taking over, yeah, I can do that. I'll do the little, we should have a little clicker here to change slides. So, co-sponsors and co-sponsor strategy, just wanted to talk a little bit about how we do that. So, this is actually the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, which has a ton of sponsors. And I'm gonna show in a second what it looks like when you pass a bill. But, some of this language is interchangeable, but typically the person who introduces the bill is named a chief sponsor, or sometimes we would just say the sponsor of the bill. Some of those are a little interchangeable, but that's the person who has put the bill in. Their name is first. So this was Don Harmon and Marcus Evans. And then chief co-sponsors, there's 5 in each chamber that you can get, and they are the 5 ones that are have hyphens between them. And then a co-sponsor is anybody on the whole list that have the commas here. And so there is some strategy. Not that sponsorship is the most meaningful piece in the world, but you get 5 top ones, and I'm going to show you in several slides when they actually take a vote. The only people whose names show up on the board where they take the vote are the chief sponsors. So you have the chief sponsor and then the 4 chief co-sponsors. And when you do that, one of the strategies on that is to try to get very diverse chief sponsors that show up. And so you may want to have a Republican and Democrat. You may want to have different people from different caucuses, the Black Caucus, Latino Caucus, Green Caucus. You may want to have people who are from different areas of the state, Chicago, downstate, et cetera. But you may want to show a diverse number of people. And I will say, like, some of that is because if you're a lawmaker who hasn't especially read the bill and hasn't seen the analysis and you're voting on a bill, like, one of the ways you might make a decision is looking up and being like, oh, that's my buddy who's right next to me. You know, if they are a sponsor, that means that they've read this. They know what's in the bill and then I can vote for it. So that's some of it, but sometimes it's just the 5 people who are most excited about the bill and want to be at the top. So there can be some strategy behind it, or you can just, whoever signs up. So sometimes I'm very strategic. I think about it in advance. Who are the top 5 people I want on this bill? Sometimes I don't care. And with sponsors, some of the reasons you do this is sponsorship is a good way to show that somebody is supporting a bill without having taken a vote. But I will say, I've seen people sponsor a bill and then vote the opposite way. So they don't need to vote yes on the bill if they put their name on there. Even if they are the person who's introduced it, if they forget to vote on it. I've never seen anybody vote against their own bill, except maybe in some of the Century Club ones, which we'll talk about in a second, but I've never seen anybody vote against their own bill, but they might forget.
I saw a senator forget to vote for their first bill that they were passing. And so it's a tradition that everyone signs the vote total, and that senator's was so excited to watch everyone vote for their bill that they forgot to press their own green button.
So just to be said, just because you have 30 or 60 sponsors of a bill, doesn't mean you have enough votes to do it. But I'm gonna tell you just a little bit of the story of a bill. Just by going through this bill from 2022, this is a bill where we banned PFAS incineration in the state, perfluoroalkyl substances, forever chemicals. Oh, you're gonna do it for me, thank you. But so perfluoroalkyl substances, we introduced this bill in 2022. And you can see from here, there is a first reading. And then it goes to the Rules Committee, and that's just where it goes to get a sign that happens to all the bills. So it got read, it goes to the Rules Committee. And then it went to the Economic Opportunity and Equity Committee, where it passed unanimously. Placed on calendar to our second reading. We did amend it, you can amend bills on second reading, but not on third. It's a technical thing. And then there was a second reading. It was held because we needed to amend it still. So we adopted the amendment in this committee. We added some co-sponsors. The House floor amendment was adopted on the floor. And then it was placed on the order of calendar at third reading, where it waited. And then third reading came and it passed 100 to 1-1. Then it went over to the Senate, where it was Senator Chris Belt's first reading. It went to assignments, which is the Rules Committee in the Senate. Added co-sponsors. It went to Environment and Conservation Committee. And then it passed Environment and Conservation Committee with a new amendment. This is the important part. There's a new amendment in the Senate. Went to second reading, added some sponsors, passed, the amendment was adopted. Went to third reading, passed unanimously. But then, because it was amended in the second chamber, had to go back to the first chamber. So there was a concurrence vote in the chamber where it went to committee on final time. It was adopted by the House on final time. Then it was sent to the governor approved. The effective date was June 8th, 2022, because that's when it was signed and it was an immediate effective date. And then it went into being a public act, and that is how you would cite it from there. So the next slide, I've updated this one for this year. Yay, bill passage. So this is actually the power plant demolition bill, EPA environmental justice. And you can see on this one that you've got Ma, Ortiz, Williams, Gonzalez, Ammons. Those are the top 5 chief sponsors. And you can see this is what folks see when the vote is happening. That's Leader Marcus Evans, who is leading the floor that day. And this is the vote being taken. I thought it might be a little close. It was only 62 votes. And so this is what it looks like. And it's green, red, and then yellow buttons would be present. Nobody was present on this one. And then there's people who don't vote, which is 10. So, so the other piece, want to know about amendments. Many bills get amended. Most bills get amendments. Some bills get amended many times. There's no limit that I'm aware of how many times a bill can get amended. You probably don't want to do that because it's very confusing. Typically, the amendment is filed by a sponsor on a bill, but you can do as somebody else filing an amendment on your bill, which can sometimes be hostile. One of the most interesting ones I ever saw was there was a bill on Tiger King. It was on banning like these unaccredited zoos, and that was wild because Carol Baskin and Joe Exotic both filed slips in the General Assembly, and I didn't even need to watch that bill in committee, and I was fascinated. I did not leave, but they on that particular bill, a hostile sponsor came and filed an amendment hostily on it, and they were allowed to do it. It's a weird one. But that is something that can happen. I don't see it happen very often. Bills can only be amended in committee or on the floor. And so, there's a committee amendment or a floor amendment. It's a committee amendment when it's on first reading. Second amendment's usually a floor amendment. And the bill has to be on second reading to be amended. It also needs to be in a committee to be amended, which is something we sometimes face, is that the bill might just be in rules or assignments, and it cannot be amended. If it's in rules or assignments, it has to be in a committee or on second. And so that can be difficult if you're thinking of filing and want to make changes. So put committee amendment versus floor amendment. Sometimes the committee amendment versus floor amendment is about timing. So a committee amendment is before it's gone to second reading, and the floor amendment is after. And the floor amendment also, they can amend on the floor. I have done that before when we were working on fracking. Senate President Herman, who was just a senator at that time, introduced a whole ban on fracking on the floor of the House that had never been to any committees. I'm also seen it go the other way, where there was a bill I was working on, bobcat hunting, and like all of a sudden it's just going to the floor with the amendment and never went to committee. So super fun. You'll get a lot of holding on second. We're gonna go into advanced vocab in a second. But hold on second is something you'll often hear in a committee, because sometimes you have a bill and the lawmaker will make a promise to hold on second. So that bill maybe doesn't have all the pieces it needs another amendment. And the sponsor may make promises that I'm gonna hold this bill on second and bring it back to committee. They may make promises that I'm gonna have remove all opponents and bring it back to committee, but there's promises that'll be made. I guess it's just like, you don't have to keep those promises, but like you would get in a lot of trouble, with other committee members if you just decided to like bring the bill to a floor vote. If you've agreed, you're gonna hold it on second. It's just more like a cultural thing, but you could theoretically move it. It's just like you would be not keeping your word. So if you say you're gonna hold it on second, you hold it on second. Next, we're gonna go into a little bit of advanced vocab. And so don't worry about this piece, because you are getting, this is like 401. You know, where we did 101, now we're in 401 legislative session. And David, please feel free to help me with any of these I don't get right. Or we need more. I think I'll get them right. I feel like we should do this as like a, you know, I say the thing, you tell me what the word, but next time we're gonna be prepared for that. So postpone consideration. David already talked about this, and this is where a bill has gotten enough votes and somebody who voted yes on the bill can place the bill no, that's motion to reconsider the vote. So postpone consideration, sorry. Postpone consideration is when you brought the bill for a vote and you haven't gotten what you needed, 60 or 30. So you say postpone consideration, and then you get to go for another vote. You only get 2 tries. And so the second time it is dead. So that is postpone consideration, is you brought it for a vote, it didn't make it. So you postpone consideration.
And a lot of times that's because people weren't on the floor, or it was a close vote or something like that, where you know, I have the votes here, they're just not immediately present. And so you can say postpone consideration, come back an hour later after people have gotten lunches.
I've seen that happen too. Actually, on bobcat hunting, they postponed consideration, they didn't have enough votes, and then they did an hour later. And now we can have bobcats. Anyway, failures. So motion to reconsider the vote. This is what I was talking about, which is actually, David, why don't you do that one?
Sure. The motion to reconsider is that in that Norwood case, that was what was filed, the motion to reconsider. If you're on the prevailing side of a bill that passes, you can file a motion to reconsider. Sometimes it's done as a preemptive thing by a person who is a supporter. They file a motion to reconsider, and then they immediately rescind it so that no one else can do that, because otherwise somebody could file a motion to reconsider and hold on to it, and it would hold the bill up as that Senate Bill 40 did.
Mhm.
But a lot of times they don't end up taking a second vote. I don't know if I've ever seen that used to actually take a second vote, but it could theoretically, you could reconsider the vote and retake it.
Yeah, because I have seen it used to kill something and not have it move forward, and in that case, you would have a vote to remove it.
Yes,
But you need a lot, so it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So the next part, verification, if you ever go to Springfield and you watch the floor, you will be horrified to notice that people are just wandering around, but often they're working by talking to other people about bills, they're doing their own lobbying of their own bills. There's no lobbyists allowed on the floor except maybe some legislative liaisons from various constitutional offices. But it's just legislators and staff that are allowed on the floor. And so there can be a verification, and that can be somebody is just like, hey, I don't think there are actually 60 people over there right now, and I'm gonna call a verification, and then everybody needs to sit in their seats, and they call them alphabetically, and they say whether they're there or not, or, so that can be a voice vote, and then, or they can point to, like, they can just name people, you know, like, is this person here today, is this person here today, and that, you know, it can go well, it can go badly, it can take a lot of time. Another piece on some advanced vocab, the rail, we'll often talk about being at the rail. That is like literally a railing on the third floor chamber where the lobbyists all hang out. In the Senate right now is over in the Howlett building instead of in the Illinois Capitol. So there's not like a rail, there's a hallway. But they'll be back into the Senate chamber in 2 years, 1 year from now, 2026. They'll be back in there and hopefully it's beautiful, but come visit. Fiscal notes. Fiscal notes are a thing that you can put on a bill to have an agency provide information about something. It can be, let's see, a budget note, it can be,
generally it's
just-
used.
yeah.
If you don't like a bill and you think it's gonna be costly or an administrative burden, you know, if we go to my EV school bus bill and I was an opponent of that bill, I would say, I want a fiscal note from the Board of Education on how much this is gonna cost. And a lot of times that it's used to delay the process because then the agency has to go through, they have to say, there's no impact on our budget, or there is an impact on our budget, but it's minimal, or something like that.
And this was a much more useful tactic when there was a Republican governor, because now with the Democratic governor, sometimes the agencies rush to file the note and then you don't need to remove it. And they'll be like, no, this doesn't cost any money, leave us alone. But there can be times if there is a note, you need to discharge the note before you can go for a vote. So it can be a way to delay something. An omnibus bill is just, you know, like a package, so you might put a lot of things in one bill. The Century Club, I haven't seen that in a while, but it's when 100 people vote against a bill.
There was one last year.
What was
I
it?
believe it was a bill about having a dog in the front seat of your car.
Or fish.
Or
Or
fish.
So, yeah, Century Club is when you have 100 no votes.
It doesn't happen a lot because most of the time people know this is gonna go down badly, and then they don't run a bill because you don't want it.
Or they just want the trophy. There's a
Yeah.
trophy, actually. So, and then there is the BIMP. A BIMP is something we run around screaming in May. That's the budget implementation. So when they pass the budget, there's both a budget that says like how much money they're gonna spend, and there's a budget implementation plan that we call the BIMP, and it's just like a fun word that's horrible. And so the BIMP is what actually puts the money out for the budget. So it says what line items it's coming from, what taxes it's coming from. It might be an increase in tax. So that actually implements the budget. So budget implementation. So we talked about that. The Governor's Office of Management and Budget, GOMB, is another piece where they're the people who propose the budget and give you lots of information about it. And then a hostile sponsor or a pre-file. This is something we're thinking a lot about right now, because like if you don't like a bill, you can go become a hostile sponsor and take over the bill, and then you can just kill it when it gets over to the next chamber. So you can have like a great time in one chamber, and then there's a hostile sponsor. Now there's a lot of ways to discharge hostile sponsors, so it doesn't always like stick. But sometimes it will, because they'll be like, yo, yeah, I'm working on this. I'm putting a lot of work in to pass it, and they're not. So you gotta be careful about that. If you have a bill, always making sure that somebody sponsors it in the next chamber. And a couple more advanced things. A lot of people, rules or assignments, it's scary. Some people are like, that's where it goes to die, but really, I just wanna say it's part of the process. So I have a couple of examples here. So this first one is where a bill was introduced, it went to first reading, went to rules. That's generally what happens with all of them. It gets introduced, it goes to rules, and then they choose what committee it will go into. I have another example here where the bill goes to first reading, goes to assignments, goes to committee, never gets a vote, and then it goes back to assignments under Rule 39A, and that bill has not met deadline, so it is dead in assignments. And it's not necessarily, 15 years ago, they were a lot more like they didn't let bills out of the committee or out of rules or assignments. It would just die there and they would just make those decisions there. They rarely do that now. And a lot of times it's the committee where it dies. I also want to show you a shell bill. A shell bill is where you're like not quite ready for text yet, or maybe you are, but the leadership puts a lot of these in. And you can see in this one, they've crossed off and they put and that's the entire text of the bill. It hasn't done anything, but it's been put out there so that we can read the bill 3 times from its title without actually having the text on it. And this can be, like, is this good government practices? Great question.
Because you only have to read that short title, the only reading is House Bill 2402, an act concerning civil law. So that's a reading of the bill. It doesn't have to have language attached to it. It's just an act concerning civil law. If I had an act concerning education that was a shell bill like that, but it was intended to be my EV school bus bill, all it would need to be read was an act concerning education. And then later we could add language to it that actually does what we want to do.
Yeah, and I didn't include that like act concerning, but that is an important part of the shell bill too. And then there's vehicle bill. This bill is actually the bill that we passed about local wind and solar siting that told counties that want to prohibit wind and solar, they can no longer do it. Love this bill. This one was originally the telehealth athletic trainers bill. And it was, I didn't have what it's an act concerning, but it's probably like an act concerning regulation or something. And we were able to add onto it the local wind and solar siting bill. So it's called the vehicle bill because it's a bill this bill actually got out of the House into the Senate. So it was a bill that we could amend and send back to the House, but we used it as a vehicle, and that's why it's called the telehealth athletic trainers.
It was an act concerning regulation. So regulation can really mean anything. Same with state government or, I don't know. Energy.
Just not fish.
Just not
We're
fish.
putting a lot of stuff in the fish bowl. So, just now we want to talk our last portion here, and we'll do like 15 minutes. We're gonna run through these. Making your voice heard, lobbying and advocacy. We're gonna talk about witness slips, testifying committee, grassroots lobbying, registered lobbyists. I'm gonna start the witness slips because I'm gonna provide a hot take here on witness slips to all of you. What is a witness slip? So it indicates organizational support or opposition to the bill, and it is read before the bill is heard in committee. It used to be heard on paper and it's accessible online. So when the committee happens, the chair, basically welcomes the committee sponsor to either present from their, they might be sitting there, or they can come up to the table and present their bill. But before they present their bill, they say, we're gonna read the witness slips into the record, and they may actually read the slips if there aren't very many of them. But if there are hundreds and hundreds of witness slips, often they will waive reading of the witness slips. So none of the witness slips get read out loud. It just is up to the members of the legislature who are on that committee to go and read them. They're accessible online, you can see them. But I'm gonna provide my hot take here, because I don't know, we can do hand raised. Who here has filed a witness slip before? Like lots and lots and lots of people. Yeah, lots of people have filed witness slips previously. And I don't want to stop you from doing that. But I want to tell you that it's more effective to contact your lawmakers than it is to file a witness slip. It can be great in filing a witness slip when we get hundreds of people to file a witness slip. Lawmakers know, like, oh, that bill is important. But your powerful voice is you as a constituent contacting your lawmaker. And the thing here, I think it's a little tricky too, because this witness slip thing is available. You fill it out, you think you've taken action, you're done. You're not done. You need to contact your lawmaker. That's the first thing you gotta do. And so when you file a witness slip, your lawmaker cannot see, they can see your name, They don't see addresses unless they go in and look, but it only provides name, organization, and representation. They don't know where you live. They don't know that you're their constituent. They just see 300 random people who have no impact on them. And so if you really want to make a difference, if you're filing a witness slip, always make sure you're contacting your lawmaker as well. And I get a little worried that the witness slips are distracting us from what is valuable, which is that constituent contact, because that's what's powerful. That's what makes lawmakers know, like, oh, this impacts me personally. I mean, there will be lawmakers that look at something and they're like, oh, there's like several hundred witness slips. This is an important bill. I see the environmentalists on it. I'm probably cool with it. But more impactful is you as a constituent contacting your lawmaker. So at IEC, we don't always direct people to file a witness slip. We divide it up with our tactics. So we choose some of our priority bills that we want to make the biggest difference on. And those are often the ones we ask people to go file as many witness slips as possible. So when we're doing a foam foodware ban, when we're doing wetlands, we will ask you to distribute and get as many witness slips as possible. But if we just have a bill that like we're fine with and we're going to move forward, we're not going to ask that. And partially that can be more impactful because like if it's me and IEC and Environmental Law and Policy Center supporting, but also Farm Bureau, I want the chair of the committee to read those witness slips. And if there's 300, they can't. But I do want to, just as a grassroots tactic, I'm really concerned about witness slips distracting us from what is important and valuable, which is contacting your lawmakers. And we like to provide a lot of different ways that you can do that, whether it's the form emails, whether it's dropping stuff off, postcards, phone calls, coming to district office, lobbying. Those are all way more important than getting 300 witness slips. And I also think there's a little bit where, some folks are working towards the 300 witness slips and they don't understand what the impact is when they come to Springfield. They just see that number and they think they've won, but there's a lot more work to do. I need you with us. So that is my hot take on witness slips.
One follow-up on that is having made analyses for legislators when I was on staff. If there were 1,000 individuals, I wouldn't put anything. I would just put the organizations that were represented, IEC, ELPC, NRDC, et cetera, like at Sierra Club, go through those. And I would have maybe 10 names on there of supporters and then opposition, neutral, whatever. Rarely did I ever say, hey, you're getting a lot of heat from this or a lot of support from random people in various districts. Because I figured if they cared, they would call.
Mm-hmm. So that being said, there's still gonna be times we want you to fill out witness slips. And so David's gonna go through how to fill out a witness slip.
This is the ILGA dashboard. It is available at, I believe, myilga.gov and also a link from the ilga.gov website to GA dashboard. I recommend for folks, if you plan to fill out multiple witness slips, log on, create an account so that you don't have to fill out your name, address, et cetera, every single time.
Well, and I will also with the log on, even if you just do one, if you make a mistake, if you've logged on, you can go fix that mistake later. Like if you hit proponent and you meant opponent, that's the only way you can fix it. If you haven't logged on, you can't fix the mistake.
This front page has things like committee hearings, links to different members, links to the different people who are in the committees, links to the hearing details of those committees as well. So here we have the schedule for the day. You can find out the location of the committees. Today's House committees, room 114, elementary education at 10:30. That might want to learn about electric school buses. Choose your committee. This one we're looking at environment back in 2017. Clicking on that thing on the right-hand side is, will give you the details of that committee hearing, which will say what's been filed for committee, what's on the agenda for committee. Here you have 6 different bills. We're talking about classifying milkweed, county and municipal.
That's the bill that said you couldn't list milkweed as a noxious weed, which should pass.
And so we want to create a witness slip. The little magnifying glass is to look at who's already filed witness slips. The one next to that looks like a little piece of paper with a pencil on it is to create a witness slip. This is what it will look like. fill out your name, etc. If you've logged on, it will pre-fill that out for you. Representation, that is if you are representing a group or a firm. If you're just an individual, you can just say self or individual. Normally, I put Environmental Law and Policy Center is mine. How mine.
And I just would, for groups that are registered nonprofits or volunteer groups. And this is, I'm saying this as an attorney, but I'm not your attorney, so get legal advice. But we're gonna talk about when you need to register and when you don't. And it's my belief that if you are not registered, like your organization, and you fill this out a lot of times, and then it's found out that like you like spent more than the limit and you should have registered, this is something that could be used as evidence that you were lobbying without registering. This is where, not that I have seen the state enforce it at all, but if they ever decided to, this is a place they might go. And I'm gonna talk about when you need to register and when you don't. But if you are a nonprofit, I would be cautious. I mean, like have one person do it, but don't have a lot of people do it from your org saying representation. They can put it in firm, business, or agency, it'll still show up, but just select one.
And also, if you're a member of an organization, but not necessarily in a decision-making role or in a staff role, I just advise against saying that you represent that organization versus.
Firm, business, or agency, it still shows up, but it doesn't imply that you are lobbying on behalf of that org.
Yes. And then you will select the position. You can also select whether that position is on the original bill, or that dropdown will tell you if there's amendments that have been filed. So you could say, I have a position on the original bill. Let's say I was opposed to that original bill, but Amendment 1, which will also be in committee, fixes my opposition. So you could say opponent of the original bill, and then you could do the drop down later to file a second witness slip for the amendment that makes you neutral or supportive of that bill. You can also select whether you want to file testimony, either a written statement filed or an oral testimony, which you would have to talk to the committee staff and probably be in attendance, or have a link already and have talked to them in advance to be able to testify out loud. Normally, I suggest for folks, and probably 90% of my, at least 90% of my witness slips say record of appearance only, which just means I don't need to talk, I don't need to file anything, I'm just, my name, ELPC's name is on there as supporters. And then you just have to do a little prove you're not a robot.
Cool. So we're gonna buzz through this last part and then we'll take any questions. I wanna give some advice if you are ever asked to testify in committee, which I hope you all get a chance to at some point. Testifying in committee is a really powerful way to offer your experience and your expertise. As David said, you're gonna be choosing oral on the witness slip for oral testimony. Typically in advance, you're gonna wanna talk with the bill sponsor or the chair about testifying. And any of you who want to do this on an environmental bill, talk to us. We'll help you get that audience, because they don't need to allow you to testify. If 6 people say that they want to offer oral testimony, they can have 0 people testify. They have full control over how many people. This is not like public comment at a city council. They can cut it off and have no testimony. In fact, even as a registered lobbyist, I have been told, oh, we're not going to allow anybody to testify on this bill in the committee. But you discuss your desire to testify with the chair or bill sponsor. And I always advise people that I'm having testify to write a 1 minute, 3 minute, and 5 minute version. Likely the 3 minute version is what you're going to get to say. But always in the first minute, what are all the salient points you want to make? Just like spoil your plot. This is the things, these are the 3 reasons I want you to vote for this bill. Then you can elaborate a little more in the 3 minutes. And if you get 5 minutes, you get even longer. Subject matter hearing or that sort of thing might be where you're able to offer longer testimony, but like lawmakers are not listening to you if you talk for 5 minutes. You know, they want to ask you questions, but even after 3 minutes, they're probably like, they're off on their tablets, they are sleeping, you know, all those different things. So keep your testimony extremely short. There is some remote testimony allowed now still after the pandemic, but you have to ask far in advance. And usually like lawmakers, the chair has full discretion over whether to offer it or not, but they are set up in a lot of committee rooms to do it. And usually it's for folks that are like out of state, that sort of thing. So we do advise you come down, but of course you could come down and they could cancel the meeting, because that's sometimes happens. But testifying in committee, a really powerful way to share your story with the General Assembly. We're happy to help you if that ever happens. Now, a little bit more about making your voice heard. There's grassroots and there's direct lobbying. This is from a research study of Congress on what is effective in terms of grassroots lobbying. And it goes from, of course, this is like when there were still people there's still people that fax. I'll tell you that, knowing people in lawmakers' offices, there's still people that fax. Yeah. There are lawmakers that don't have email addresses, which is super fun. Love that for them. And then, the entire Senate, and then, there's in-person visits. So, like you're going from something that is less personalized to more personalized. If you really want to make an impact with the lawmaker, tell them, if we send out an action alert, edit the subject line, add your own story to the body, call that lawmaker, come visit them in an office. The more personalized contact, the better, because you are powerful as a constituent. And remember, you don't need to be an expert on a bill. You just need to tell your story and say why it's important to you. Unless you are a technical expert, and then you really do need to provide that. But for you as constituents, as grassroots, that's the way to make a difference. Social media is definitely a new way that you can lobby your lawmakers. And if you're doing it that way, making sure that those lawmakers know you're a constituent in some way. Some accounts are controlled by staff and they might not see it. Some of them are the lawmakers that you just learn how normal and weird they are in terms of being people. So just following them on social media is a good idea to learn more about what they're interested in. So,
but definitely for visits to Springfield, I think that legislators generally, we don't, it's easy to be dismissive, but I think they appreciate that people took 3 hours of their day to come down plus 3 hours back to talk about an issue. And it doesn't matter that you are not a scientific expert on it. You cared enough to go down to visit, and they view that as
yeah,
important.
the more personalized, the better. So what is a lobbyist? Lobbying is advocacy. And I think another important part, lobbyists lobby lobbyists. So I spend a lot of time talking to other lobbyists and trying to figure out what to do with the bill. Relationships are super important. I often say votes are taken on values, relationships, and beliefs. Votes are not taken back based on data, facts, and figures, which is maybe a little pessimistic, but it's accurate. Values, relationships, and beliefs are the most important part. And if they're gonna vote on data, facts, and figures, it's because they value them. And so that's a thing to think about in lobbying, how you lobby. There's different types of lobbyists. There's do-gooders that are nonprofit advocacy. You can see our set here of David, Blake, Ariel, and Nicole from Sierra Club, just chilling on the steps there. Just the best do-gooders. There's business driven, which is defense and offense for a company and industry. Like everybody's got a lobbyist. There's somebody who lobbies for Walmart, Amazon, mattresses, somebody, they have a lobbyist. And then there's contract lobbyists that are hired guns. These are our hired guns, not for IUC, but the Clean Jobs Coalition, that, Nickred's firm. So, they can be doing good stuff. But there's also contract lobbyists that there's a contract lobbyist that has guns, ATVs, strip clubs, that can be their specialty. So that's different pieces. So heading into the different pieces, I'm just gonna go through this part really fast, and I'm happy to provide more. If you are with a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, you are allowed to lobby with your organization. You're not allowed to do campaign work, so don't endorse candidates. Don't give candidates money, but if you're a 501c3 organization, you are allowed to lobby. If you're doing less than 5% of your activities, that's the insubstantial part test, you need to do nothing. So if you want to join IEC and our 501c4 and it's less than 5% of your budget, nothing. You don't need to do anything. It's the insubstantial part test. If you're doing a more than 5% up to 20%, you can take a 501h election. Only 25% of that can be grassroots lobbying. And that's on your 990s. You're filling out how much you spent on lobbying. 501c3s are limited to 20% of their budget on lobbying. So they can't do more than that, or they start to go into 501c4 territory. IEC and ELPC have 501c4 associated organizations. that we can do unlimited amount of advocacy. Our 501c4 is basically a third of IUC's budget. We can do all the lobbying we want over there. In fact, that's how we split it up. But if you're a nonprofit, you can lobby. I do want to head into the next slide here. So there is a specific lobbying definition that the IRS has that is a three-part test that involves a bill number, an ask, and a target. In Illinois, what is considered lobbying is basically everything. In lobbying in Illinois, influencing is what requires you to be registered. And we'll go to the next slide with federal lobbying. And so federal, that has a three-part test and needs to include all three parts. So if you're looking for your IRS status, you're looking at the federal definition. If you're looking at whether you have to register in Illinois, you're looking at the state definition. And what can be problematic, let's go to the next slide. If you're spending more than that 20%, you got to pay taxes on it. So that's just a piece for nonprofits. There's taxes on excess and expenditures to influence legislation. But I talked about that three-part test, and I'm going to talk about, as a nonprofit, some things that you could do. So it's really important, and this is actually nonprofit or an individual. You should build relationships with your elected officials. Part of it is awareness. Elected officials can help you spread awareness about your organization or program. Relationships can have, they can have strong networks you can plug into. It can help you build credibility in yourself and your organization. You might have a problem someday you need help with, and if your lawmaker knows who you are and you're a great person, they might be willing to help you a little more. Access, you might become a trusted source of information. And maybe someday in Illinois we'll have funding. I mean, we're doing really great with our budget compared to where we were 13 years ago. There's not like a $9 billion gap or a 9-month pay period on anything. But we're still not quite at the point where there's a whole bunch of funds messing around. And so, someday your nonprofit might need funding, and it might be a source that the state can help with state programs. Of course, right now there's a lot of IRA funding, a lot of CJA funding that's out there. But that won't necessarily be something that your state lawmaker can assist you with. So non-lobbying work you can do, things like adding your lawmakers to a distribution list, asking them to attend events, attending their events. You do need to be careful if somebody's a candidate for office and you're getting into that period of election, and you're giving somebody a microphone as a candidate, you should be careful. So talk to your attorney. But if there's no elections and they're just your elected official, invite them, give them a platform to talk to your members, invite them on a tour. I love taking lawmakers on tour. I've only had like a couple fall in the water. So, on a canoe trip, so it's fine. They've all survived. And so take them hiking, take them to see your solar panels, take them to see the projects that you've done. They love that stuff. They can take pictures, put it on social. Give them district-specific information about the issue that you're working on. And just remembering that communications that are not lobbying, we said we needed that three-part test. Educational communications that don't include a specific piece of legislation under the IRS, those are not lobbying. So if you hand your lawmaker a thing about plastic bags and it has no bill number, no reference to the bill, not lobbying. If you do a general public, call the general public about a piece of legislation that doesn't express a call to action, not lobbying. But a reminder that if you're a nonprofit that gets money from foundations don't fund any advocacy. They would need to pay those expenditures. So don't use foundation money to lobby or any restricted funds. Should you register as a lobbyist is a question, and it is expensive, especially from some smaller nonprofits. It's $300 to register your organization, and then you need to spend $300 per person to register. So we just registered like 7 people at IUC. So we're just spending about $2,400 just on the lobbying part, but it is what you need to stay in compliance. But do you need to register? If you're just an individual representing yourself, no. If you're bringing people on a lobby day, if you're just coming down on a lobby day, there literally is a grassroots exemption. If you're receiving compensation of $500 or expense reimbursement of $500 or more, you probably need to register. And so if you're a staff member and you're a nonprofit and you've spent, honestly, just like a couple days in Springfield can add up to $500 of staff salary, especially with hotels. you maybe need to register. The city of Chicago has done a lot more enforcement than the state has in the last several years. But like, you gotta be careful, because if you, do something wrong, it is very expensive. So that's why we register, we're very careful, get a report every couple weeks. So included that. If you come by Springfield, which is the next slide, stop by IEC's office, which is 520 East Capitol. We're between 5th and 6th Street, a few blocks from the Capitol. You're all welcome to come hang out with us. Make sure you wear comfy shoes. Those floors are killer on your feet and your knees. And make sure you spend time preparing in advance about what you want to do, what meetings. You can try to set up meetings with lawmakers. They may not allow you. If you just want to like calm down and hang out with a lot of people, our next slide is our 2024 lobby days. March 6th, we're going to have a soil health lobby day. Registration will be available for that soon, where we're going to be talking about conservation cropping, Black Farmer Restoration Act, a whole host of things about conservation. April is going to be a zero waste lobby day. I know they're still working on a date for zero waste lobby day on plastics and food waste and all that sort of thing. That one we won't have buses. You got to get on your own. April 30th, we're doing a conservation lobby day with DNR. And on May 9th is Climate Action Lobby Day. We will have lots of buses, t-shirts, signs for that one. So you'll be able to come from anywhere. Please come. It's just a great day to be motivated by other activists. Usually you only visit your senator and representative. And it's just an amazing day. So that's it. Now we only left 8 minutes. But we are happy to answer any questions. I'll stay past 2.
And
David.
Tucker has a list of some questions from online, and also maybe we can like bounce from that to if there's any in the room.
Yeah, why don't we take one online one and then we'll be in the room.
Okay, so David, had this to say, you mentioned the online availability of sessions. However, in the past, I've had some difficulty finding affordable access to the recorded video from receiving multiple CD calls, etc. That includes appearings and giving an accurate transcription. Does IEC or partners maintain or recommend a repository of this data so that it might be freely accessible to advocate allies and members, or might this be a useful thing to develop?
What a great question. So in the Senate committees are recorded, but you cannot have the Senate committees. They don't give that to the public.
And only some of them are recorded, I think.
Yeah, so the Senate and House are not subject to FOIA, but you can't get Senate committees. It's just, I have tried, it's not available. The House, you go to the journal room and you have to get a CD. I don't know, I've gotten them for free before, but I guess maybe I haven't asked recently.
And it also takes time for them to process, and especially with the transcripts, you don't get a transcript of a committee hearing where maybe a lot of the conversation was happening. You can get a transcript of the floor vote, but sometimes it could be like 6 months to a year before that transcript is done. So there is not a lot of transparency in that. There are other services that have video, but you have to pay for them.
Yeah.
Blue Room Stream, which is a pay service. So unfortunately, I don't have a better answer for you than what you've already.
It does look like the written transcripts are available for all of the House and the Senate for 2023. They are online, they're written. Like he said, Blue Room Stream is a third-party service we pay for, and it doesn't save everything forever, but we can access a lot of the committee hearings and send if it was recorded. It's available there. It just is difficult because you really do have to be a journalist to make a recording. And there's reasons for that, because sometimes like political trackers will, try to use those committee hearings out of context in ways that are inappropriate. You're really not supposed to take pictures or videos in committee or of the floor, despite the ones that are in this PowerPoint today. But you're really not supposed to do that unless you are a reporter that's gotten permission. So there are some opportunities available, but, and like I said, we have Blue Room Steering, but you got to ask us to get those.
Question in the room?
Another question?
If not, we can go to
Yeah,
another one.
keep going online. We'll ask each time.
Okay,
Or just raise your hand.
what is the number/percentage of different lobby groups in Springfield? For instance, I have heard that there are 3 pharmaceutical lobbies for every federal representative.
Well, I think it depends on the field, but there are like the utilities famously, in recent federal cases, it may have come out, they have sometimes a specific lobbyist hired for each representative senator, or just a couple. So that is kind of what we're up against in Springfield sometimes with when large businesses are on the other side of an issue. And then you have a handful of environmental lobbyists, but we also have people power, which is why lobby day is important.
Yeah, so for example, the Secretary of State Index Department. Oh, here it actually has a total entities registered as of, this is April 11th, 2023, but it should give us a good number. There were 2,240 entities and 2,126 lobbyists registered. And as of April 11th, 2023, that's like fewer than I would have thought somehow. But it is still a small world. And I will tell you, it is still not very diverse in terms of who is down there and who is lobbying. So, you know, if you're a woman or a person of color, come down. We need you. We need you to come talk to lawmakers. And luckily, I feel like lawmakers are more diverse than they ever have been. So more than half of the Illinois House Democrats are women. And so, you know, there's more there. And if you wanna and be interested in this career, you wanna come down to Springfield, it's wonderful / horrible. That's how many of the Secretary of State says that there are. Sorry, go ahead.
So after a bill becomes a law, what are the next steps and how does it get implemented?
I just ignore that.
Well, so the question, I'm not sure how great the owl picks these things up in here. The question was, how does a bill get implemented once it's become a law? We briefly referenced something called JCAR and administrative rules. Sometimes a bill is so clearly written that there is no implementation rulemaking that needs to be done. It just says, this is now the law, and whoever is in the enforcing body will now enforce that law. Other times, like things like the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, you have multiple agencies, you have Illinois EPA, Illinois Power Agency, they have to create plans, sometimes long-term plans, sometimes rules to govern how they're going to implement it. But it goes through a process at the administrative level. So there's administrative law that's created, and then the agencies have to implement it. And sometimes it goes great, and sometimes it takes a lot longer than you expected for those rules to get it in place.
And this is also my plug, especially if for any young people or students are in here, to like, if you really care about this stuff, go work for government. You know, and I know like bureaucracy, it can be really frustrating, but everybody has frustrations. It's just, you know, I often say, like, when our activists are working on stuff and we try to have a bill written in an ideal way possible, if we can't pass it, you know, if you can't pass a bill, it's just as bad as the worst bill that can be out there. But the corollary of that is whoever is implementing the bill has a tremendous impact, and you could have the worst bill ever. And if you have a great implementer who just decides, I'm gonna do it this way, you could have great results. If you have a terrible implementer and a great piece of legislation that's passed, you could have terrible results. And so, you know, the more we build up our agencies and we fund them and we have great people that go work there, the better that this result is gonna be. It really is about the people from all ends.
Implementation and funding are two key pieces there, where you could have the greatest idea in the world. We have an EV rebate program. How is that implemented? Questionable. How is it funded? Even worse than questionable.
Yeah, so let's do online, and then I saw 2 more hands in here, and I know we're at 2, so I understand, but we'll stick around until we got the questions answered.
Got nowhere to be.
Yeah,
So this is from Jen. A state rep told us that it would cost them, quote, political capital to get a bill assigned to a committee other than rules. What might he have meant by that?
okay, that's not real, so, yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure you actually had that happen. I'm not gaslighting the person who asked that question, but if the state rep said that, I mean, there is political capital to how many bills you can get assigned and move forward, but getting a bill out of rules into a committee is like not a problem right now. And
For the
so-
first time around.
Yeah,
However,
person.
if the bill had failed previously or hadn't gotten out of committee and was sent back to rules,
Yes,
then it might be.
yes,
It might be like you're asking to have a bill sent to a committee, but you don't necessarily have the votes to do it. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, I was trying to think of a good analogy, but I got nothing.
well, and like right now, if they have a bill on rules or assignments that was introduced last year, that will take political capital because, to get something pulled from last year and put into committee this year is gonna be more difficult, because you already put it out, it didn't go anywhere. But you know, this is why I like to be involved with grassroots activists when we do stuff, because I often feel like I'm a translator of what the lawmaker is actually trying to say to you. But you know, if it's just getting it fully brand new introduced bill out of rules or assignments, that's no political capital. But if it's something that's gone back, so I guess I should take that back. and
That
see what the
legislator might have
technical is.
just been saying, this isn't going to pass and I'm unable to do it. And they're maybe just trying to pass the buck to somebody else
Yeah, and that's
to tell
often,
them that.
that's often what they say. And that's why I go in and tell them, you gotta do the thing.
I have a question. If the law says, here are the limits, can Cook County or the city say, no, the limits should be down here? Which it still abides by the law, but it's like more intense.
Depending on the law, in some cases, there are things that overrule home rule. But generally, home rule units of government have the ability to make laws as strong or stronger than the state.
Okay.
But if there's something that says, no home rule unit shall set a limit higher than this, I'm trying to think of there's proposals on things like plastic bag legislation, where the proposal was, okay, from the retail merchants, they might say,
No city can do anything.
yeah, no city can set their own rules because we now have the state law.
Okay.
But that would require a specific language in that law to override home rule.
But if you do have something, generally you can't do like lesser than state law at the municipal level. You can't be like, you know, you can go 80 on a city road, you know, like that sort of thing. Okay, Tucker, next.
Okay, we got a two-parter from Catherine. Does in-person issue visits from constituents mean that you're meeting with them privately, or that you showed up to the legislative session to give testimony? You wanna just parse it out?
I think she was talking about the first one, meeting them in their office and having a specific meeting.
But even if you're like, you offer testimony and they know you're a constituent and you say like, oh, I'm here from Glen Ellen, like you're fine, like that is in person, they know you're real. Yeah,
Cool, and then, second to that, additionally, is there a way to reach these people without having to go to Springfield? That is just not possible during the core work hours for many people.
yeah, I mean, so, get on your lawmakers email list, follow them on social media, a lot of them will do coffees or town halls. You know, even if it's not during work hours, call and leave a message, say you wanna meet. I will say like 75% of lawmakers are eager to meet with their constituents. There are 25% that are not. I mean, there are some that'll bring 20 people from their district to Springfield and they're like, I don't care. But that's very few, and those people are jerks. So if your lawmaker's a jerk, I'm happy to take you to somebody who will make you feel better, who is a good lawmaker, that would meet with you even if you're not from that district. But I'm gonna say that's the ratio, I think, that would not meet with constituents. But some people are delighted, well, the vast majority, delighted, excited, thrilled to meet with you, and see you there.
Many of them are also, they go to other events in their regions, like I have Ann Williams and Sarah Feinholz, and they know me because I've met them at other meetings that have nothing to do with what they're doing, but they just show up so they can meet the people.
Exactly, exactly. So there's a lot of ways to get in-person contact that might not be a private visit, but many are very excited to do that, but you gotta look at timing. Like if you call and you're like, I just wanna hang out with you in August, they might be like, yeah, if I'm not on vacation, cool, let's do it. If you call them and are like, I just wanna hang out with you in May, they may be like, no, and that's real. So, do you have another question here? Do you wanna? Did you want?
I was gonna ask actually kind of the similar thread, because I'm thinking back to the graph of like effective ways of reaching out. And I remember something about like letters were kind of up in the mix, but then postcards were pretty far down. And I'm just trying to think about ways that we can help the masses also connect with
Yeah.
their folks,
Well-
and just if there is a big difference between some of those different.
Yeah, so I would say like, and I worked in a district office, I know there's some folks in here who have done that too. The more personalized something is, the better. So like if I, you know, and in general, like if I got form emails, I would be like, here's a count of how many people sent you this form email about marriage equality, right? So that would be a way that I would report. Or if there's a certain number of postcards, I just might report the number. But the more personalized something is, the better. So like if somebody sent in like a one-page letter with their story about something that's happening to them that's relevant to the right unit of government, I would like give that to the senator to actually review. And so the more personalized, the better, because, you know, and I've had stuff where, like, for example, one time we were at, we do a tour of the Springfield Farmers Market with lawmakers to talk about local food and that sort of thing. And so we walk a whole bunch of lawmakers around. And one year we were walking these lawmakers around, and a lawmaker ran into a guy that was like, you know, I'm doing this now and I really want to grow hemp because it's going to diversify what I can grow on my farm. And that day, the hemp bill came up for a vote, and that lawmaker got up and said, you know, I just met my constituent this morning, and they really want to grow hemp because they really want to have this value-added product, and they really want to diversify what crops they're growing. And this is important to my constituent. And they're like, said the constituent's name on the floor, all of that. I've seen that sort of stuff happen. More personalized, impactful, anecdotal stories, the more valuable it is.
Okay, we've got a quick one here. I think this was about witness lists. If you are not a registered nonprofit, should you file as individuals?
Yes.
Cool. Then someone asked, I'll just piggyback on another, that's okay. Does every bill have both a House and Senate sponsor?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, once it, and so that was what Jen was talking about with pre-filing. Sometimes as soon as you file a bill in one chamber, you have somebody file for it in the other chamber so that when it comes over, it's immediately under that person's name. And that way you have a person who's already bought in, you have a sponsor on the other side who's already bought in, but it has to have a sponsor on both sides to present the bill, to take it to committee, et cetera.
Cool. Great, Yana.
Yeah, I have a question about how the IEC decide which bills to make a priority. And then specifically, I have a question about one bill in particular. I don't know if you want to get into that now.
Sure, which is it?
or whatever. It's the one to remove fossil fuels from pensions.
Yep.
And I know IEC didn't support that, and I know that was probably one of the downsides to why it looks like it's not gonna make it out of committee. So I'm just wondering how you go about making those decisions, and then particularly in regard to that bill, what changes would be necessary to it, and how I can more effectively work with my lawmaker to.
Yeah, so we do support that bill. We are very supportive of it, and I know it didn't, we do choose where we're gonna put our energy in a given year. And we may actually have we have put out a priority list, which this year is about 20 issues, but we also have about 50 bills that we are working on. And that is one of them, as well as the U of I divestment bill. So those two are on the list of bills that we support and we want to work on. But when we choose our priorities, we're choosing the things that we think are going to have the largest impact, the ability to pass an environmental justice, positive environmental justice impact, an urgency. And so, you know, like with that one of the things in Springfield is you have to remove opponents from a bill. And often if you have too many opponents, so like we're also, the bottle bill is out there, for example. We strongly support the bottle bill. We want to see it passed. There's a lot of new efforts to put that on there. It didn't end up on our priority list because there are about 100 different opponents to that bill. And we see that it's going to need to take some work to remove that. So we need to do some more work to remove some opponents to that bill, to move it into shape, to be able to move it forward. But we support, we're going to spend the energy on it that will, you know, move it as far as we can. But, you know, I know we've definitely talked to groups about different people that normally are on our side that don't necessarily support it. So we got to do some work on it to get it in better shape. And then, you know, we may still, like if we find those opportunities, we'll pass it. But it's not something that we see as going to have the political viability of some of those other ones this year. So we'll work on it. It's on our, you know, despite what priorities we put out, we have way more bills that we're working on than that. We'll probably track about 400, and there's probably about 40 or 50 that we've introduced ourselves. And we did I believe we wrote that one, Ariel on our staff, so we do support. So those are things that need to happen. Tucker,
Okay, I think this is the last one in the chat.
great.
This is from Jan Bogart. Can someone keep amending a bill they don't like and keep it off the floor, to delay passage?
I think only to a certain extent, you can, somebody could introduce hostile amendments, but I think at some point you can discharge those hostile amendments with a vote, I believe, or just push the bill to the floor as written with a vote.
Cool, yeah, go ahead.
I know that this has all been about state legislative, but I am wondering like about city council stuff and like particularly next week, because I know the Cabo bill is gonna get introduced, and if you have any just suggestions on that timely issue about how we could advocate.
Yeah, city council, gosh, is it different?
Yeah.
I go over there, I'm like, I know we've done this same thing for City of Chicago Civics version, so I hope we'll do it soon again as well. But city council, like, a lot of different things, like, in city council, they can just like put an amendment in while it's in committee that nobody's ever seen before, and they just attach it and add it and vote on it, and suddenly this is moving forward with the amendment that you haven't even seen. I've had that happen. And it's very much opaque. It's a very, like, I think it's a lot less transparent somehow. But, you know, the similar things are important for city council members too, to hear from their constituents. It's just, you know, maybe a little different because a lot of city council members are used to constituent services and not legislative items. So they like I'm gonna fix this pothole or this rat hole, you know, but not any of the, like, they're not gonna, like, the legislative inquiries are new to a lot of people, but the more, it's the same thing holds true. The more personalized contact you can get with your own lawmaker, the better. Like, do you know what bar they hang out at? Do you know that they're gonna be at this community event or this block club? Or are they gonna give this presentation? You know, having that local contact with them and saying, I want you to vote for this is really important. So on Cabo and Clean Affordable Buildings Ordinance, if you know your alderman, go see them, go text them, go call their office and say, please vote for this thing. That is the same type of grassroots action that we need with aldermen as well. And like, they're even influenced by even fewer emails. You know, I would say like, you know, the number of emails varies on what influences people, but with aldermen, I think you can get 10 or 20 emails in from their constituents and they're gonna pay attention because they don't get a lot. And that's from offices that I know. But at the state level, sometimes you might need 50 or 100 or 200 for that lawmaker to be paying attention, depending on who they are. Some will pay attention to 5, some need a lot. You know, I remember during the last pieces in session, I dropped off a stack of letters to Maddie Hunter from her constituents. Well, Blake from our staff did, and she was like, now I have to be a no, these are my constituents. So it does matter. And you know, that's definitely what we recommend. So I don't know if we have a link for taking action on Cabo.
The other thing, the city council has 29 new aldermen. That's over 50%. And those people who just got elected, they want to serve people. They're not there to make money off the city. So they're more responsive, I think, to want to know about what the constituents want and need.
It is becoming more and more legislative, but maybe we'll add that and call your alderman about the Clean and Affordable Building Ordinance right away. You can. We don't have anything at the state level quite yet on our action alerts, but we will soon because they just went in this past week. So we'll have a lot of action alerts, fill them all out, call your lawmakers.
Cabos is coming out next week.
Cabos is coming out next week. Take the action alert when we send it to you. Any other questions? We went a little late. Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to facts and figures, who helps you get those facts and figures?
Well, so IEC works with over 150 different environmental organizations with experts from around the country. So that's where our information may come from. It's really interesting though, of thinking of how legislators get involved, because they have staff that write bill analysis for them. And, you know, they might get it from like, I've had staff that just copy and paste my fact sheet into the bill analysis that lawmakers vote on, which like, is that okay? And to me, that's fine. Take my fact sheet. I don't care. But to other people, like, you know, maybe they're not getting their voice heard, or maybe the oil industry is getting their fact sheet copied and pasted into this analysis. So, you know, the staff there's not a whole lot of staff, like you think of Congress and there can be 15 people in an office. Usually state lawmakers have one person in the district office and one person that they may share in the Springfield office. And then they rely on shared staff from the Senate president or the leaders.
And that was my job on Senate staff, but I had all of the bills that were coming out of, on energy, labor, and environment. So if there's 100 bills in my desk, I'm not saying I copied Jen's work, but you can take the pertinent information and sometimes those facts and figures, and sometimes you say, according to Illinois Environmental Council, this is what this is designed to. That's what I would do, but I'm a responsible attorney.
Yeah, never David. Other people maybe copied and put it to my fact sheet. Any other questions in there? No? This has been really wonderful. We've recorded it, so it'll be available later. And, David and I are always available for any questions. We're not gatekeeping Springfield. We really want you to understand the process and develop the power needed to make a difference on all these issues.
Thank you very much, everybody. For coming.
See the articles.